there's a lot of very, very interesting things uh, that certainly Americans, need to know, but the more important thing is to kind of settle in on the question of, okay, what do you guys need? What do you need from us? How can we be helpful? Because in the end, and I think as Ms. Aiken Taylor said, I mean, it really is your country, and for the youth, it's way more your country than it is anybody who's older, because you're the ones who are going to inherit it. And so when she said earlier, you're already the leaders, it is. I mean, you are the leaders. And so my job as a former diplomat, as a professor, as a lawyer who does human rights, my job is, okay, how can I be helpful? You know, Tell me what you need me to do, and then we'll see if we can figure out how to get it done. Because a good lawyer, like I think I try to be, is your job is to solve problems. There's a roadblock, well, then somebody's got to figure out how to fix it. And if people are complaining about money, then we follow it and find out who's getting it. And I have to tell you, it's amazing, what a little experience, which is what Aiken Taylor and I have. We have a little experience, and our job is to share it with you. And so, basically, my background is I grew up in our state of Ohio, in the upper Midwest, right near the Great Lakes. And I went to university. I went to college. I went to law school at the University of California. I've been, basically I started out as a labor lawyer and did all kinds of work involving public sector unions. So I understand how the government works. I did a lot of work on non-discrimination, race discrimination, religious discrimination, sex discrimination. So I know that field pretty well, and I understand the politics over here pretty well, and you understand where you live, and so there's for those of us who want to help one another, the idea is to say, look, I don't know enough about your neighborhood to come in and be particularly useful, but I know how to take directions. And so that's what I'm really looking for here is ways in which we can work together so that we advance the agenda of the people that you represent, because in the end, you're the ones who live there. And the United States is like a 300-pound gorilla. When it does something, it affects people in other places. So what we want to make sure that we do, as we're trying to figure out how to be helpful, is that we minimize the damage, for when the big beast moves around. So this is the perspective I bring to the table, and I'm from now on I'm going to basically shut up unless I have a question for you, because I want to hear what you have to say.
Okay, thank you so much. The music is ready, and I think you would really appreciate this. This was created by the youths as their own national anthem, or their own anthem. So they played this at all their events, just to remind them of who they are. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
From the north to the south, from the east to the west, and Nigerian youths are rising, standing strong among the best. With courage in our hearts and vision in our eyes, we shall build a better future where our beloved county thrives. Try Africa, try
Awesome. Okay.
That was
So
great.
it was, wasn't it?
It
Thank
was
you.
really good.
All right, thank you very much. Please permit me to take it from here.
It's all yours, sorry.
All right, thank you, Ma. All right, good day, everyone. On behalf of the leadership of Tri-Africa Youth Movement, I warmly welcome you all to another edition of our town hall meeting. Today is a special session as we have the privilege of hosting a distinguished global leader whose career has spanned diplomacy, international development, governance, and humanitarian service. His wealth of experience offers us a unique opportunity to learn about leadership, global cooperation, and the role of young people, how young people can play in shaping a better future. At Tri-Africa Youth Movement, young Africans through dialogue, mentorship, and meaningful engagement with leaders from around the world. Today's conversation will reflect that commitment. Let me start by giving a brief biography of our special guest today. Today we are having Ambassador Robert A. Bob Destro. Is an American lawyer, scholar, diplomat, and a public policy expert with decades of experience in international human rights, religious freedom, diplomacy, and constitutional law. He served as the Assistant Secretary of the State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor at the United States Department of State between 2019 and 2021. During his tenure, he works extensively on advancing human rights, democratic governance, religious freedom, and the rule of law around the world. Um, Before joining the U.S. Department of State, Ambassador Destro was a professor of law and served in several academic leadership positions where he taught constitutional law, international human rights, civil liberty, and public policy. He has also advised government, international organizations, and civil society groups on governance, legal reforms, and human rights issues. Through his distinguished career, Ambassador Destro has been recognized for his commitment to promoting democratic value, justice, freedom, and citizen participation. Today, he joined us to share insights on diplomacy, leadership, global affairs, and opportunities for young Africans to contribute meaningfully to building a stronger society. Without further ado, it is my honor to welcome our esteemed guest speaker, Ambassador Bob Destro. Sir, thank you for accepting our invitation. We are truly honored to have you with us today. Sir, let me start by asking this question, sir. Having served at one of the highest level of U.S. diplomacy, what leadership quality do you believe young Africans must develop to become effective leaders in this world, sir?
Well, I think the same characteristics you bring to working with your friends. I mean, diplomacy is about relationship. I mean, it's all about relationships. Don't let anybody kid you that it's not about minerals, it's not about peace and war, it's not about weapons, it's about personal relationships. And the faster you get that, into your head, the better you will be at being a leader, because leaders, have to motivate people. And I can tell you all kinds of stories about that, but the most important thing is when you sit down with somebody, you need to know, well, what is it, you know, why am I having this conversation? What do I want, from this conversation? And sometimes, in one project in which I worked, the whole point of every single meeting was to have another meeting. And it sounds funny when you say it that way, but the whole point was to keep the conversation going so that we could get to know people. Other times it's, well, we need you to stop sending people back to China who escape. I mean, sometimes it's very specific, but sometimes it's just, how do we get to know each other better so that when the time comes, I can ask you to do me a favor and you won't be insulted.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Many African youth aspire to influence governance and public policies, sir. What practical advice will you like to give young people seeking to make meaningful contribution to democratic governance, sir?
Well, I would say volunteer a lot. That we have a very famous now deceased politician here in the United States was the Speaker of our House of Representatives. And he made a very famous statement, at least in this country, that all politics is local. So in fact, when I first moved to Washington, we were driving back from the Midwest, and we stopped in the city of Chicago. And what had happened was the muffler fell off of my car, so I had to get it fixed. And the guy in Chicago said to me, "So why are you here?" And I said, "Well, we're in the process of moving from Wisconsin to Washington, D.C." He goes, "Well, why would you want to do that?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to be joining the government." And he says, "Yeah, but that's only national." Okay, I want you to think about that. This guy, from the perspective of somebody who ran an auto shop in Chicago, Illinois, he says, "Why would you want to even be involved in national government?" He says, "All the action is here at the local level." And that is really taken very seriously. And so if you really want to learn how government works, you just got to volunteer and work on projects and get your hands dirty and get to know people, because and you know that already. You're leaders in this organization, so you obviously know that already.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Sir, reflecting on you personally, sir, your work has focused extensively on democracy and human rights, sir. What role do you believe youth-led organization like Tri-Africa Youth Movement can play in strengthening democratic institutions across Africa, sir?
Well, I think there's, a huge role. There's not going to be democracy. There's not going to be accountability across Africa unless somebody demands it. And you are the ones who are out there doing all the work. So when Ms. Aiken Taylor and I were talking about following the money, this is something as simple as, okay, who's getting the contract? What do they get? What do we get for the money that we spent? Where did the money come from? Where is it going? These are all really very basic questions that somebody in your group, is the journal who wants to be a journalist. If you really think about it, what's a blogger? What is somebody who is an influencer? You're basically talking to people about what you see and what you hear and what the relationships are. So my reaction is, you don't need experts like me other than to give you advice occasionally. But what I'm really much more interested in is like, well, what are you doing that you could use our help on? You're the ones who are going to get the job done, not me. I don't live there.
Exactly, sir. Sir, let's talk about leveraging opportunities, sir. In an increasing interconnected world, sir, how can African youth leverage diplomacy and international partnership to create opportunity for their own communities, sir?
Well, I'm going to actually quote a big expert in my life, and that is my wife. And she reminded me a long time ago uh, when and somebody said this. I gave this answer to a group of Indian friends when we had a long conversation about what does President Trump mean when he says put America first? And I think my wife, who has got her own PhD and has her own distinguished career in both academics and government, she says, "Oh, all that means is what they mean when you get on the airplane, and they tell you put your own face mask on first, and then help the people around you." And if you actually think about that, if something goes wrong, you have to take care of yourself first. So the question is, what do I need to know to be useful to the people around me? And it's questions of skills, experience, connections. I mean, you know that better than I do, but it's those relationships, that really, you know, if I know somebody to call, why do I have to do the work myself? Right? I mean, in the end, the whole point is if you can get it for free, why pay for it? I mean, and it may not be free in the sense that, well, you may owe somebody else a favor, but so what? I mean, that's what life is all about.
Exactly, sir. Thank you very much, sir. But, sir, considering this fact that many young people are discouraged by unemployment and limited opportunities, sir, from your experience, how can they remain resilient while preparing themselves for global opportunities?
Well, that's a much more interesting, I should say, a much more difficult question. But I think it's answered in exactly the same way that I answered the previous question, which is focus first on yourself. And this question, and this is a big discussion here in the United States. I mean, if one of the big issues here, obviously, is AI, right? And you think, who is the most important person in an AI data center? Do you know who it is? I'm asking, who do you think is the most important person in an AI data center?
Sir,
Ma-
I think the or
Now, the reason I asked the question is that the most important person is the electrician, and the second most important person is the plumber. And nobody thinks about how do you make things work, right? And the big discussion here in the United States today is how come we have not prepared our youth for the opportunities they need to have in order to succeed in a world where you've got a lot of automation. And our vice president just said yesterday, he says, this is like the end of the 19th century with the Industrial Revolution. This is, and we weren't very well prepared for that either. And so the question, how do we make people more resilient, is we have to find out what gifts God gave you and then figure out how to help you develop them.
all right. Thank you very much, sir. Talking about AI or technology in general, sir. Nowadays, technology is rapidly transforming governance, education, even in diplomacy, sir. How can African youth position themselves to lead in the digital era?
You just got to, it's like going swimming. You got to decide, am I going to jump in the pool or not? So AI is just a tool, just like computers are a tool. You know, all the algorithms that they talk about, those are all basically reflections of the person who wrote the program. So my point is keep focusing on what you need in order to do the kinds of things you want to do. And the government, especially at the local level, needs to be responsive to those needs. And I'll give you an example. One of the people that I'd like to introduce you to is a friend of mine here in Virginia, who was, our former governor's director of outreach for bringing minority communities into working with the state government, right? And a lot of that, even today, there's the one of the major foci of the Trump administration is outreach to youth and saying, look, we need people who can build things. I don't need, it's nice if you have a TikTok channel, that's great, but what do you do? I mean, what can you actually do with your hands? What can you do with your head? And you need to be able, if you and I were going to go into an interview and I was going to hire you for a job, you know, I'd say, okay, so tell me why I should hire you, right? If you can't answer that question, then you're not very resilient.
All right, sir. Thank you very much, sir. It's about what you can offer. Sir, you have worked on several level with Africans, sir. Looking ahead, what gives you hope about Africa's future? Do you see hope, sir, from your own experience about Africans, sir?
Well, people like you give me hope. And and I will make sure that you get the information from my side too. But there's going to be a conference in the middle of August at the University of Stellenbosch, and it's basically going to be about corruption and human rights. And what I find really interesting about it is that you know the people that I know and work with in Africa understand exactly what the problem is. Africa is not a place where people from other parts of the world, whether it's North and South America or China or Europe or any place else, you're not a resource for us. You live there. This is your home. And when young Africans say, wait a minute, we live here, this is our home. This place is for us, first and foremost, to develop for our friends, for our family. And when you start saying, wait a minute, I don't need to come and ask you for something, I live here. So, you're the one who doesn't know. I know better. And how can we make things develop? And this is really where I think there are two basic economic models in the world. One is what we in the United States call the Hamiltonian model, after Alexander Hamilton, who was our first Secretary of the Treasury. It was basically, how do we build a country where people have jobs, where they can grow food, how do we build, right? And then the other version, so that's what we would call a symbiotic relationship with your friends. Like we scratch each other's back, but the other is what we would call an extraction model. That's what the colonial system was about. Africa was a place where I would go get cobalt, but I don't care what happens to the kids who mine it, because it's about me, it's not about us. And so this question of what do you need to do, you need to demand that these relationships are about us, not about you, not about me.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Um, you have a lot of experience working with Africans, and one of our major problem is sustainability. We used to have beautiful policies on papers, but we even implement some. But sustainability, you see a lot of projects we stop along the road, and I don't even know of your project follow the money if it's still up to now being run as it is before. So our problem in Africans is once the funding stop coming from development partners to support the project, then our government don't really pay attention to projects like that, and most of those projects stops along the way. So, sir, um, what can you say about sustainability in Africa, sir? And what
Well,
are
I
the
mean, I think,
challenges here?
yeah, I mean, I think sustainability is a big topic. And so when you say sustainability, what do you mean by that? I mean, and one of the things that that I would always, say to people is, well, what exactly is it that you want? And don't talk to me about sustainability. That's too abstract. What I want to know is what are the top, if you could ask me for three things, what would those top three things be? I had a woman who I got to know a woman who was the president's wife in a country in Europe. And she said, well, what do I need to do, to get the United States to do X? And I said, well, you need to give me a list of the top three things you want. And she said, well, but what do you want us to do? I said, that's not the right question. The right question is, what do you need? Right? And the first thing she said is, protect us from the Turks, protect us from the Turks, and protect us from the Turks. That was an honest answer. What she was worried about is the defense of her country. But what she's also worried about is the raping of your country by people coming in and taking all the minerals and just leaving, right? And so this question of how do you work together to build business? Sustainability only means, look, I have to go into Washington, D.C. this afternoon, at 2:30 for a funeral, right? So I know where I have to be. I know when I need to be there. I need to know that I got to be there early to get a parking place, and getting there on time is what I mean by sustainability. Like, did I sustain the effort to get the job of getting to the funeral on time? And it's the same thing true if you're talking about building a bridge, building a highway, getting the garbage picked up. I mean, in the end, you need to know what a good outcome looks like. If I say to you, I want to go on a vacation, and you say, okay, well, I want to go to the mountains in Nigeria. Well, the first question is, how do I get there? Right? You have to know what you want to accomplish, and then we can talk about sustainability.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. The word sustainability is a bit dicey question. It depends
Oh
on
yeah,
what
oh
you want.
yeah.
All right. And at this junction, I would like to open the floor for other participants to also ask questions. I know there are a lot of questions. So please, if you have any questions, you can kindly raise your virtual hands, then we give you permission to speak. Thank you. I think our Vice President Abubakar Yusuf, Vice President Partnership, kindly unmute, sir.
Okay, thank you for giving me the opportunity once again. Permit me to say on the existing protocol. Sir, my question here is, Tri-Africa Youth Movement make a study on the issue of electioneering in Nigeria. So we came up with a policy of election observers and monitoring team. So we need so many partners, like people, influential people, international people like you, to be part of this policy. And we need so many resources to host this kind of policy. So I want to ask, to what extent are you going to support us in this kind of partnership? So that's my question to you, sir.
Well,
And the second,
oh, sure, go ahead.
okay, and the second question is, looking at it, we youths in Nigeria have limited opportunities here. So do you have opportunities like scholarships, for us here in Nigeria, for our youths here in Nigeria? Thank you very much, sir.
Well, let's start with the election observation question. There's lots of opportunities to connect you with people who do that here. Because a lot of it, election observation is a classic example of why politics is local, and so there's a whole, group of people across our country in every state, who are very involved in election observation. They've got volunteer attorneys, they've got people who work with the local boards of election. I mean, it's in, election observation is one of the most fundamental ways in which you do local self-government. So I think the question, could we find the resources to help train people? Probably. But I think in one respect you need less training than you do basically a lot of energy to go knock on doors and find out how you get involved in that process, because that's the way we do it here. And you just have to find out who runs the elections and who does the local observing. And like I say, there's lots of groups that we could connect you with. Now, the other question was resources. This is where the question of development, most development assistance does not help people. And actually, that's going to be the topic of one of the panel that I and another person are going to be on in August in the virtual conference on corruption and human rights at the University of Stellenbosch. And this question of how do we, what skills do you need in order to be able to be, to able to look at things like supply chains, look at sustainability. I mean, many of you already have those skills. The question is, how do we get you the experience you need? And what I'm talking about is paid experience, not volunteer experience. That's a harder proposition, but I do know in working with people here in the United States who are working on Africa development issues, what we need is, we've gone around and around and around on the question of security. How do you get people from other countries or even in Nigeria to invest in development projects, when they're not sure that they won't get beat up, or kidnapped, so these are all problems to be worked out, but the future is with all of you, and part of our job as the older ones is to try and figure out how to match you up with the services that you need.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
I think you can go ahead. You
Okay.
can go ahead and ask your question.
I was waiting for your go ahead. Thank you, Prof. So you work with youths. I know like you're a professor at a university, you work with law students, graduates, and you've worked with other youths in preparation for them to have a global presence. So I'm trying, what advice would you give to a group like this that is just starting on how they can focus on communal good, like projects that benefit the larger community, not as individuals, because that becomes some of the tools that they can use to distract them from working for the community. So, but based on your experience with working with youths in the global space, what do you tell? What advice would you give them to focus on that communal benefit, because it's eventually going to translate to their own personal benefit as opposed to putting personal benefit first?
Well, I'm going to come back to what I said before, is that all too often, those of us who are older, focus on what is it that you can do, what kind of project can I get involved in? And that's a good question, but the older I get, the more I am convinced that we need to give you all permission to focus on yourself and say, what gifts did God give me as an individual, that I can really contribute to the community? And then how is it that I can use, if you like to organize parties, that makes you ideal for politics, because people have parties all the time. If you like to do media, if you like to write, if the kinds of things, most people are really good at the things they really like to do. And there's a lot of science behind that. And this isn't the time or the place to explain it, but I keep trying to tell the people at my own university, would you stop with I understand that people have to have certain coursework. Of course you need to learn how to be a lawyer, but you also need to learn about yourself, and to say, well, what, if somebody, if I had all the money in the world, what would I do that I think would be really helpful and a lot of fun for people, for me and for others. And, if you had asked me when I was, your age, you know, I would have said, oh, I want to be an ambassador, and he said, if you asked me why, I said, I don't know. It sounds like it would be a cool thing to do. You get to travel, you get to meet a lot of interesting people, you get to go to interesting meetings, you get to discuss important stuff. Well, what that means is that I like people, I like to get out and travel, and so why not figure out a way to get paid for doing what you like to do already? I mean, so the point is, focus on yourself, and what do I need to do so that somebody, why would somebody pay me to do something? And the answer is, you'll figure it out.
Thank you. Back to you, Usman. I think Usman, are you here?
No, I think Osman is out due to the network problem. So,
Okay, he dropped off. Okay.
yes.
Okay, he's back in. I think I see him back in. Usman, over to you. Oh, let me make him co-host. Sorry, he's muted. Okay, he's back in. I'll just Usman, over to you. Okay.
Sorry, my network kicked me out. Sorry. We are still on the open floor if you have any contribution. But let me ask this question, sir. My question here is, sir, if you haven't been through this, you have been in a lot of projects with Africans, and yes, you have a lot of experience. And I don't know, there is always some kind of, we Africans used to have a kind of a particular project that we later or regret not doing while we still have that opportunity. So I'm trying to see how I'm going to rephrase this question. So, sir, if Ambassador Bob Destro is to die today, for instance, I'm not wishing you that, sir.
I get it.
What is that thing or project that you will regret not doing while you have that opportunity to Africa? What will be that particular thing that you regret not doing while you were in service, sir?
Well, I think I keep coming back to the question of trying to get people to understand, as both an educator and as a diplomat, that what we need to do is to help people understand, what makes them special. And it's not what you have that makes you special, it's who you are that makes you special. And so, to the extent that I regret not doing things, it's mainly trying to really be a pain in the neck to kind of, force people to kind of look and say, look, we need to know more about the people we're working with. I mean, if I were going to sell you, some new drink, I would do a lot of market research, right? And, and I just don't see it getting done. And the biggest market, when we talk about the youth market, yeah, I mean, all the big tech companies are mining all your data. They know more about you than anybody else. They know probably more about you than you know about you. But the question is, do you know enough about yourself to really market yourself and make yourself useful? So I would start thinking not in terms of projects, but in terms of what knowledge and skills, what can I do to contribute, and how will that contribution help me to develop those skills, even the knowledge and skills better? I mean, it's a very, very narrow focus at the bottom, but you're the foundation of the future. My generation we've done what we're supposed to do, and we look back and say, if I had it to do over, what would I do? I would have learned a lot more about what I'm good at early in my career, not figure it out later.
Thank you very much, sir. In African context, we are always complaining about corruption. And from the African context, there was a little research that was conducted. And since the independence of Nigeria, as at 1960 that we got independence, up till dates, the same slogan, the same campaign methodologies, the same promises is still, since from that 1960 is the same thing. Nothing has changed. They are still campaigning of good road, schools, electricity, power, and it's up to now is still the same thing. And each year, a lot of money is being budgeted for all those things. And up to today, we haven't seen any results, sir. There is this issue of open governance, OGP. I think Nigeria, even part of the, they have signed into in Nigeria, like the state our governor has signed into OGP, Open Government Partnership, whereby the government opened it. As I speak to you, sir, Kaduna State budget is in the state portal, you can go in there and download and see what is going on there. And there is quarterly report of the budget implementation. There is open budgeting, but some of the states in Nigeria, I think we are not up to 5 states in Nigeria that have signed into those open budgeting. So what do you have to say regarding the OGP, that is Open Government Partnership, and where should CSOs focus more? Should we focus more on following budget tracking or other areas, sir, in order to hold right questions, sir? Thank you,
Well,
sir.
I mean, this is where you have to do this on a project by project basis, and I'll give you an example. I worked on a hospital project in Ghana a few years ago. And I mean, it took forever to get it built, but the very last thing, it was all ready to go, and we couldn't get the local government to pave the last half mile of road to get you from the highway to the hospital. And that wound up taking months. And so, when you say budget, yeah, somebody needs to do budget, but somebody needs to go find out who actually, pushes the button to get something done. So this is always it's a project by project, but you still have to say, what is it exactly that we want to have done? When we say, is it, telephone cable? Is it putting up a light, in a park? Is it getting the grass mowed in a park? Is it putting up a basketball field? You have to have a measure for what a good outcome looks like. Otherwise, it's too abstract.
Thank you very much, sir. What message will you like to leave our young Africans with, to determine in order for them to have a creative and positive mindset for the democracy, sir?
Well, I mean, the most important thing is you can do this. You just need to be really organized and be disciplined. And you need people to share the mistakes they've made. I mean, older people like me, what our experience is all the mistakes we made. We say, geez, if I had that to do over again, I wouldn't do it that way. I would do it this way. And that's really where people like me come in. And and where you say this is where mentoring is very important. It's like identify a need. It could be just a small one, and then work it from beginning to end. And you start with a small project, and eventually you can do a bigger one, but it's all the same skills. So it's the knowledge and the skills and the relationships, give yourself opportunities, so that at the end you can measure, did we run the race? Did we run 100 meters or did we only get to 75? You have to be able to measure at the end. I see we got a number of hands up here.
Thank you very much, sir. Let's open the floor. We are now in Q&A session. Let's see who has raised his hands. All right. Okay. Our Auntie Jimoke, you can please unmute and ask your
Let me yield to Abraham since he hasn't asked. Abraham and Abdulaziz haven't asked, and then if nobody else asks, I would ask. I can ask my question. So I'll yield to Abraham.
All right, Abraham. Mr. Olem.
He dropped off. Abdulaziz is still here.
Yes. Good evening, sir. Oh, sorry. Thank you so much for this wonderful piece, sir. So I really appreciate them. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your time and the sacrifice to share this wonderful piece with us. So while you were discussing the other time, you asked us that what are those things that we want? Because practically there is nothing we want to offer you for now. But my question just goes those like one, the question is can we get like the permission to be ourselves? Because to just be frank with ourselves, there have been some foreign influences that has gotten Africa backward up to this point. Yes, to be frank, so we have that in place. So, like, can we get permission to be ourselves? That's the first question. So the second question is, can we get the necessary resources to support this movement? Perhaps in terms of movement, or in terms of sharing knowledge and skills from your end, because I think that is basically what we need to support ourselves to move this movement. Then the third question is, will this relationship not be a parasitic one? Yes, because this movement is not the first to start. Like in terms of wanting to change non-governmental organization, wanting to change things. So we have the issue of Nadeko, who started very good, but now they have actually derailed from what they tried to correct. So and presently they started with foreign influence support, like full support when there were this dictatorial regime of Abacha then. So now the question now is, will this relationship not be a parasitic one? Of course, there will surely be something both of us have to give, but I just want to know now. Thank you so much, sir.
Well, I mean, you've raised a lot of very important questions. But I think in one respect, it starts with you. And it's what specific outcome are you looking for? And let's say, I'll give you an example. A good friend who is has been very involved in Nigerian politics for a long time. He's an American, and works with the American veterans of Igbo descent. And what we've been talking about is we realize that we can't do corruption. We can't, we have to make sure that people have jobs. We have to make sure that that there's investment and that the investment is being looked at very carefully. And so, and we can't, we've been talking for years about how do you create security around certain places. And finally, we decided after, several years of talking about this, why don't we just try and get some people who are displaced, who live in an IDP camp? Why don't we just say, let's take 3 or 4 families and see if we can't send them back home and create an environment for them back home? If you can do that with one group of families, maybe 5, 6, 7, 10 families, if you can do that one thing once and get it to succeed and make it so that they can raise their crops, they can start businesses, that is a major accomplishment. We looked around and around and we said, wait a minute, we're going to have to start small because these other problems are too big. And that's how people like you get involved in projects like that and other ones. Say somebody's going to set up a palm oil factory, or, what is it, whatever it is, um, you've got to get in there and get your hands dirty and learn that there are going to be people out there who don't want you to succeed. I mean, that's the reality out there. Sometimes people don't want you to succeed. There are people who have other agendas. So in the end, it's still, how do I get in there? How do I work on this? And what do I need to do to make it go forward? That is intensely personal, and it depends on what you're working on. But it's all basically the same relational skills.
Yes, thank you, sir. That's enough. Thank you so much, sir.
I think Abraham can go ahead now.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. So we really appreciate you for this time that you've availed us. Nigeria, like many other countries in the world, I mean, like almost all countries in the world, is a country whose value is shaped by religion. Sadly, in my own opinion, religion has not really been the place of religion in the social and political affairs of the country has not been clearly defined. And therefore, my question will be that as we, as members of Tri-Africa Youth Movement, who are youth, who profess different faith and traditions, what will be your recommendation on how we can engage in public policy debates that are essential for national development without being accused of imposing our own religious values on the wider community, or without necessarily sharing some sort of religion backlash. That's one. And the second one will also be that considering the fact that, like I said, Nigeria's value, the value of the citizens is not only shaped by religion, but most of us, we are highly religious. What it means is that even those things that belong to political and social sphere, we tend to consult our religious beliefs, our religious authority before engaging in them. And in this case, um, what will be your advice to religious leaders? By this, I mean, how can a religious leader in Nigeria engage effectively in advocating for justice, peace, and the common good of the citizens, regardless of their creed, without allowing its constitutional integrity and moral authority to be co-opted or diluted or perhaps weaponized by politicians who are always out to do that?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, and the answer, I think, is that you have to work together across religious lines. I mean, that you know, uh, the United States is a very diverse country religiously. For years and years and years, people, tried to use religion to divide people. And the reality is that, you have to start. We started working on a project a number of years ago in Palestine, where we know that the Palestinian women had a hard time, getting their breast cancer treatment in Israel. And so we came up with the idea, why don't we get, if a church has a car and the mosque has a room and somebody else has the volunteers, then why don't we all work together and fix one problem for the community? And it's not only that you're working together, it's that everybody sees that you're working together. And this is really where that's where the religious leaders have to work together, but not on abstract problems. It's like the religious leaders in a community say, hey, look, we want people to be involved in voter observations. And so not only are we going to encourage the people at the mosque or at the church, to be involved in the election, we are going to show up together and stand behind the people, who are doing this. And religious leaders have a very, very important role to play, but they can't be shy about it, and they can't really be, quote, political about it because we don't want them to become targets for the government. But anytime, that's why I always would say, you follow the money, in the end, it's all about power. And so the idea is, how do we solve community problems? Is there a way that the religious groups can work together on getting a street paved, making sure that the kids know how to read, making sure that poor people, have food? I mean, these are all the kinds of things that religious people can do together. And the United States is actually pretty well known for the degree to which, the religious sector in the United States provides more social services than the government does. And they do it more effectively than the government does. And that's why you say, but you also need to understand that certain groups, they believe that, their religion allows them to tell everybody else what to do. Well, you can't have that, but this is part of just recognizing what the neighborhood looks like.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ambassador, for for your time and your insights. My name is Enrique Kentebe again, and I just have a few questions of my own. So I'm just trying to think if I don't know if you have uh, Nigerian engagement and probably some partnership relationship that you still have existing in Nigeria. Maybe the U.S. Embassy, maybe the Nigerian government, as it were. So, is it possible to have an introduction of the Traffican youth movement to maybe the assets that you still have in Nigeria? Probably the public policy sector of the U.S. Embassy in Nigeria and all those other collaborative opportunities. Because while you are speaking, I took note of one point that you made, that the reason for a conversation is to have opportunity for another conversation. So if this conversation is going to continue in terms of a partnership with assets that you still have existing in Nigeria, what are the ways that the Traffican youth movement can be of benefit? That is my first question. The second question is, do you have an idea of the present US government, the Trump administration's policy on Nigeria, specifically on Nigeria? Because we have a president that has not visited the White House, and it has not happened before in the history of our country. Um, Maybe before a year closes of an elected president in Nigeria, you see them have a visit to the White House, and we don't have an idea why that has not happened now. If you have any information on that, thank you so much, sir.
I'm not sure that I have any information about that. The but I know that there's a lot of interaction between the Nigerian government and our government here in the United States. Uh, it's really the question of what do you want engagement about? And as I was telling somebody earlier today, uh, who is from Central America, she said, well, look, your deputy secretary, who's the number two person at our State Department, is going to talk to her prime minister sometime next week. And I said to her, well, what do you want him to talk about? And she said, well, let me explain. I said, I don't need you to explain. I need you to write down on less than one page, maybe a half a page, like 3 or 4 points you want to get across. Because the higher up on that food chain you get, the smaller amount of time you have. And that was something when they say, well, let me explain to you. No, 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 I'm sorry. These people do not have enough time to listen to the explanation. That's what their staff does. And so, and what people, who don't live here don't understand is that you can do things not only at the federal level, but you can do things on a sector level, like health and labor and, materials, but you can also do it on a geographic level. We have 50 states here. There's only 2 states that I know of that have Africa offices. One is Minneapolis and the other one is Florida, or the one is Minnesota, the other one's Florida. And so there are economic partnerships, there are education partnerships that if we have them happen at a low enough level where you can actually show that you're doing something, you can get those meetings. But those meetings are the outcome of a process. They're not the beginning of one.
Thank you. If I can ask a follow-up question, Abdulaziz asked the question that was on my mind, actually with the security situation in Nigeria and the role of the global community. It seems like Nigeria is on fire, right? And everyone is watching to see, oh, how big is the fire? How dangerous is the fire, right? From afar. But they have also been responsible for throwing the firebomb into Nigeria through whether it's the illegal mining and people are pretending that foreign nationals don't have anything to do with it. The security, the reckless level of insecurity we have in Nigeria is as a result of mineral resources. And everybody seems to just think it is farmer or headsmen or bandits doing this. And the world is silent on that. And that's very troubling. So how can we get, and Abdulaziz said, oh, can we get permission to be on our own? We don't need permission to be on our own. Can we be allowed to be on our own? And if not, can the global community also take responsibility for their role in the destruction of some of these countries and then hold the culprits accountable, right? Because everyone, all the global community, they know where the corrupt politicians are, they know where they hide their money. Why do they create a safe haven for people that they know are destroying their people and killing their people? So that's one of my own cries. And I think you and I have talked about this before. How do we bring that? And I know you're doing a lot in Washington in that regards, but there's so much you as a foreign national can do. But how do we Nigerians also cry out to say, this is where we need intervention. This is what we need from you. Can you not make it okay for them to rip the country and then come hide their money in your country and use it to develop your country? Can you hold them accountable for the slaughter of innocent Nigerians and the seizure of lands instead of you now doing business with them? How do we do that? Thank you.
Well, I mean, it's really hard, but like I say, I think it's, I hate to say this, but there's no such thing as the international community. There's just people that you know. And this is where you remember that you and I talked about, you need somebody who's got some energy and some curiosity to say, well, we know that XYZ NGO got, $200,000. What did you do with it? Somebody's got to go and ask questions. You know, People know, I mean, we've had this experience in this country. You know, the you know, if there's illegal mining going on, somebody's got to go take pictures. Somebody's got to talk to people. That's dangerous work, but you can't do it. I mean, that's what accountability is, really dangerous work. We have huge scandals in this country about people stealing hundreds of millions of dollars. And when you say, well, they have to be held accountable, people get all upset and say, but all we were trying to do is help people. Yeah, well, the only people you help was yourself. So it really is accountability. If you're talking about illegal mining, then somebody needs to take pictures. Somebody needs to talk to people. You need to document it. It's all at the local level. And once we have the facts on the ground, then we can start figuring out what tools we can use to fix it. But that's really where the corruption comes in. I mean, most human rights problems are not because people don't like your politics. It's because you're getting too close to the money.
Thank you for that honest answer.
Thank you very much, sir, Professor. I have this one question that I want to ask.
Okay.
Oh, all right. As a young African increasingly seeking greater participation in governance, just like our president said, the diplomacy and global decision making, what practical steps can us take, to move the youth movement beyond discussion just like this and create genuine opportunities for young people to influence policies, access leadership, and contribution, leadership and contribute meaningfully to the development of Africa and Nigeria. Because when you look at it, South Africa have issues with Nigeria, and this is a kind of diplomacy issue that has not been resolved for years. So how do you think, as a young African, we move from talking online, having all these sessions, and having this practical experience on solving these kind of problems? Thank you very much, sir.
Well, I mean, I think that when you said earlier, you have local chapters, you have city chapters, you have state chapters. You just have to get involved at whatever level you think is most important. But the ideal thing is identify a problem that you can start working on. If you say the problem is corruption, that's too big. It's too abstract. But here where I live, we want to know why when the county sends somebody out to fix a broken basketball hoop, it takes 5 people to fix the basketball hoop. You can, one of us, 2 people with a ladder should be able to put up a new net on a basketball hoop. The extra 5 people that they send along is the corruption part. It really is, you have to be focused on specifics, and then you can learn from each other. The question, somebody has got, ideally, if you're looking at election observation, somebody needs to be on the board of elections. Somebody needs to go work for the people who run elections and figure out how it works on the inside. You don't get somebody doesn't just give you the information and say, oh yeah, you caught me. I'm sorry. I'm really corrupt and I confess. That doesn't happen in real life. So what happens is you need to get people who understand. That's why journalists get in trouble all the time because they're nosing around in other people's business. And they said, well, wait a minute, it's not other people's
Yeah.
business. This is the community's business. And that's why we have things like freedom of the press. That's why here in the United States, if you go back and listen to, you guys inherited the British system where everybody says there's the police are not going to have any guns. People are not supposed to have any guns. And so when it winds up, we say here, so only the criminals have guns. And how do you defend yourself? My most basic human right is my right to be alive and to walk down the street with my family. If I can't do that, I don't have human rights. And the question is, how do you fix that? And part of it is I grew up, my dad was a policeman, and it requires local police who know who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, and who the stupid guys are. The stupid guys, they're fixable. The bad guys you need to get rid of. So, what can you do? Work locally, to and get the kinds of skills you need to be able to move up that ladder.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Sir, I would like to refer you back to Mr. Harry's first question. I think you haven't answered that. He asked you two questions. The first was, I think you even jotted down regarding those you've worked with in Nigeria. Maybe you can refer us or recommend us to them to set up way to collaborate and partner with them too as well.
Yeah, that is, I will make a list and share it with you. I have a very good friend who I was with them last night at a meeting in downtown Washington, who are working with various church groups in Benway and some other states, Ann Arbor in Rivers, and so there are people who are working in different parts of the country that we can introduce you to that we know, and you can introduce them to other people. So, I mean, there's I'm going to have to leave in a few minutes here because I've got to go to this funeral. But one of the people that is going to be there is just literally he's landing here in Washington in just a little bit. He's coming in from South Sudan, and they're working with the South Sudanese to deliver food assistance to people in flooded areas using drones. I mean, so there's all kinds of people who really want to be helpful. And it's mainly my role as the middle kid here is to help you do some networking. So yeah, I'll give you a number of people that we can introduce you to.
Thank you very much, sir. We'll be happy to have them, sir. Thank you very much. I think Auntie Jimoke or our president will follow up on that, sir.
Okay.
I would like to ask one question, sir, before you leave. From your experience, sir, what qualities do these international development partners look for when considering partnership with youth-led organizations like ours?
Well, I mean, the qualities they look for, are you friendly? Are you trustworthy? If you say you're going to do something, do you get it done? And if you don't know how to do something, are you smart enough to say, that's a really good idea, but I have no idea what you're talking about. So you have to be honest, and you learn more about people working together than you would by reading. I've had some of the best, quote, interfaith discussions by working together on a project with somebody. I mean, in the hospital we worked on in Ghana, you had, the area is Muslim. The property was owned by the Catholic Diocese of Cape Coast. We brought in a bunch of people from Italy, and the whole idea was how do we meet a local need? And the two local needs that were identified were breast cancer for women and river blindness for everybody and maxillofacial reconstruction, when kids are born with cleft palates and things. That hospital was designed to do those three things only. And it took us probably 5 or 6 years to get it off the ground, but that was interfaith. Most people think, oh, let's get together and let's talk about Islam and peace building and Christianity. No, 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 no. You build something together, whether it's a house, you take care of where I'm working right now on a project where we're trying to get, the churches in Ukraine and Russia are the only people who would have the capacity to help kids, to help these young people who have been injured in the war. How do you get rehab for them? The churches are they're the only ones that have the network. They're the only ones who know people. They're the only ones who can actually make you feel guilty if you don't volunteer. So I mean, it's like do something. I don't care what it is, but do it together. That's the key. And you'll figure it out. All you got to do is talk to the people in one of your local chapters and say, what is it that really annoys you, that the government isn't doing? I mean, if you just go ask people, they'll tell you. And you don't need to do a lot of expensive research. Then the question is, how do you use these networks to get that job done? And each one of them is going to be a little bit different, but that's I could fill you in on a lot of conversations, some of which, involve bringing resources from the United States into local communities in Nigeria. Our government wants to help, but they're not going to be involved in something that can be used for private gain or for corruption. That's where we don't need we it would be easier. I told somebody in South Africa the other day, it would be easier to pay people a lot of money to stop being, gender-based violence. I'll just pay you for not beating your wife, right? It would be cheaper to pay them to stop than all the money they're spending on the NGOs. So the question, how do you solve the problem, is really what we need smart people to be thinking about. But we have to have a problem, and it can be, look, Nigeria is a really big place with a lot of people. So there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of little problems, and if you work on little problems, then you get the experience you need to work on bigger ones.
All right, thank you very much, sir. I think you have done justice to this. And since there is nobody raised his hand and you have another engagement, I would like to give you a closing remark, sir. All right. As we come to the end of today's town hall meeting, I would like to express our deepest appreciation to our distinguished guest speaker, Ambassador Destro, for generously sharing his time, wisdom, and invaluable experience with us. Your insight on leadership, diplomacy, democracy, and youth empowerment have inspired us and challenged us to think beyond our current realities. We are grateful for your encouragement and your confidence in the potential of young Africans, sir. To everyone who joined us today, thank you for your active participation and thoughtful engagement. The true value of today's discussion lies not only in what we have heard, but in how we apply these lessons in our communities and daily lives. And on behalf of the President, the National Executive Council, and the entire family of Tri-Africa Youth Movement, and thank you all for being part of this inspiring conversation. Today, let us continue to empower youths and build tomorrow and transform Africa. Thank you and have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, and thanks for having me this afternoon, my time, and this evening, your time. And we'll stay in touch.
Yes. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
sir.
Thank you so
Have a
much.
good day.
Have a
So
nice day ahead.
we'll catch up next week if that's okay with you. I'll find time on your calendar. Thank you so much for your
That's
time.
good.
Really
See you later.
appreciate you. All right.
All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. Should I stop the live stream? It was streaming to YouTube. I can stop that now, or do you guys want that